and welcome to our series on supporting recovery in the workplace. I'm Andrea Brune, New Vista's Regional Director of Substance Use Services. In this series, we'll teach you how to support employees in recovery and bust myths about what recovery looks like. Let's first talk about stigma. Stigma is discrimination against a person or group of people based on one or more outwardly identifiable traits. In this case, we're talking about the stigma faced by people who are living with substance use disorder, also known as SUD. People living with SUD may run into assumptions that they are dangerous, unable to manage their own condition or function normally, or they're at fault for the disease or caused it. The most problematic of these assumptions may be the view that people with SUD have no idea how to take care of themselves. Most of them do, they just need support and resources to accomplish it. Stigma impacts every decision someone makes for themselves while in early recovery, and the more that we can combat that stigma, the more successful all treatment and employment efforts will be. So how did we get to this place where we have so much stigma and so many assumptions? Before the advent of brain imaging and monitoring, there were several theories proposed as to what causes SUD. There was the moral argument that people with SUD were morally flawed. There was the pleasure-seeking theory, that people were relentlessly pursuing pleasure, no matter the consequences. And there was the peer pressure theory, that people were using substances for purely social reasons. All of these theories assume that someone has control over their condition. We know now, thanks to brain imaging and progressive science, that the problematic use of substances is a disease. The American Medical Association first recognized alcoholism as a disease in 1956 and included other substances in 1987 due to undeniable brain-related evidence of structural and chemical changes in the brain during the progression of the disease. This research dispels those stigma-causing theories we just learned about. But even though the science is clear, the stigma still remains today. It keeps people with substance use disorders from accessing services and moving freely in their worlds. It can feel easier for someone with SUD to go it alone rather than to confront these negative stereotypes head on. We've heard firsthand reports of people experiencing stigma in emergency rooms and other healthcare environments. They are often treated as second class right off the bat when presenting for assistance. The number one thing anyone watching this can do to combat stigma is to pay close attention to not only the care and support we give, but the words that we use. We can use person-first language where the person is at the heart of any words used to describe them, like referring to someone as a person who struggles with substance use disorder. Just like we realized some time ago that people with cancer do not like to be referred to as cancer patients, our language can really make a difference. No one likes labels, and they further prevent people from talking about their experiences. Even the term second chance employment can be stigmatizing because it singles people out based on their past. On your screen, you'll see a list of common concerning language about substance use disorder, as well as a list of helpful alternatives to use. At the top, you'll notice harmful examples include addict, alcoholic, drunk, former addict, and reformed addict. The alternatives shift the focus to person-centered language, like person with substance use disorder, person with alcohol use disorder, and person in recovery. From there, the list goes into common words used in the service of people with substance use disorders and their alternatives to use. For example, a drug screen is not clean or dirty, but contains illicit substances or does not. The National Institute on Drug Abuse provides a very comprehensive list of language shifts that can be made when discussing substance use disorders. It is important to be aware of this language and make attempts to correct it if we notice ourselves falling back into old patterns. Within the stigma that already exists with substance use disorders, there's added stigma associated with people who use medications for opioid use disorder as part of their recovery. Medications for opioid use disorder, MOUD, or methadone, buprenorphine, or Vivitrol, for example, are provided to assist those with opioid use disorder. MOUD is a life-saving tool that cuts the risk of overdose in half. Its previous name, medication-assisted treatment, carried its own stigma by implying that medications were in some way separate from the treatment itself. We don't call chemotherapy chemo-assisted treatment for cancer. It's just treatment for cancer. Methadone has been a gold standard treatment for opioid use disorder for decades and should be considered first-line treatment. Suboxone is a newer medication but has shown similar results. MOUD treatment includes doctor's appointments and accountability requirements. For many, this is a viable option for full recovery. People who take their MOUD as prescribed are in recovery and not exchanging one drug for another. When talking to potential employees who may be in recovery from a substance use disorder, let the person guide how much they do and do not want to share, aside from logistics that may need to be discussed for employment. Be mindful of asking questions only related to job performance and not fishing for further information out of curiosity. Be mindful of where these conversations occur and who might be able to overhear them. Everyone deserves respect and should be able to uphold boundaries around speaking about their recovery. That may mean allowing them to speak freely about their recovery if they're comfortable, or allowing them privacy. Let the employee guide the way. People incarcerated on drug charges make up nearly half of the prison population, 45.2% to be exact. On top of that, over half of those incarcerated on any charges meet criteria for a diagnosis of substance use disorder. Most of these crimes are not dangerous, but are a product of the course of a disease in which the brain's survival system is rewired to place substances at the top of its priority list. Now let's hear from Voices of Hope Program Manager David Brummett, who shares his personal experience with stigma and how he overcame it.
I'm David Brummett. I'm Program Manager with Voices of Hope, and currently I'm supervising 8 different programs there focused on providing recovery support services and outreach to our community. My personal story of recovery is a little bit different than a lot of my friends. I didn't find substances until I was 35 years old. And at the age of 35, I went through some life changes. My circle of friends changed. And I had never really experienced what it felt like to be intoxicated or under the influence, and I asked them. That was probably one of the worst questions I ever asked my friends. Addiction quickly consumed my life. What started out as a curiosity became something that caused absolute destruction in my life. And so now I've been in long-term recovery for over 3 years and have put my life back together, and I'm focused on the future now. Stigma is, I think it's a word that doesn't have a significant meaning, but for someone, for example, like myself, who had a picture-perfect life before addiction, I would have been considered honest, moral, trustworthy, reliable, professional, all of those wonderful adjectives we could think of. Once addiction entered my life, I became known as the complete opposite. There were times where I would be in the store with my mom or my dad, and people would ask, "Is that your son?" And they would almost hang their head low. Out of shame, because they didn't know what to say, because at that point, everyone knew I lived in a small town, so everyone knew my story and what I was going through. So I think words are so powerful, and so whenever you think about someone in addiction and you hear words like addict or junkie or those types of things, just to me the pain that those words bring up, because I've been called those things, to flip that and say someone with a substance use disorder or someone in recovery or someone who is dependent upon a substance, to me it's just, it takes away that pain and that shame. Because for so long, when I would hear those words, I would almost want to hide. Even now, there are moments where when I say I'm someone in recovery, there's still a stigma, because someone will say to me, "Well, you don't look like someone who will be in recovery." And my question, of course, is, well, what does that person look like? Someone in recovery or someone in addiction can look like any of us. Just the word second chance employment or felony friendly employment, or there's lots of other things I've heard like recovery friendly employment, transformative or transformational employment. I'm grateful that it's still a step in the right direction, but I think to still yet separate someone is just adding another level of stigma. One of the things that is important for employers to think about is that people in recovery, yes, there was a time in their life they were dependent upon something. Maybe they made some horrible choices, or their behaviors were not things that they're proud of now. But for someone in recovery who has created the foundation in their life, they're very much worthy of that second chance. Oftentimes they're more loyal and more dedicated because they're wanting to prove that they're worthy of that. And so they're people who normally are last to call into work or miss a day. First and foremost, if they have current employees that are in recovery. I think it would be great to create like an advisory committee, and I don't want to make that formal, but just a group of people who could provide solid guidance. And secondly, I know the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce offers a lot of resources. Organizations such as Voices of Hope would be more than happy to come in and do sort of a Recovery 101 for their management staff. We also provide Narcan training and can just really talk about addiction overall. And so I'm grateful to work for an organization that sees my potential rather than my past, that they've permitted me to shine and lead multiple programs, lead staff, develop relationships with participants. And on the days that I struggle and I'll think my to-do list is too long or, oh my gosh, this is too much, I'm reminded that 5 years ago I left prison, got in my mom's car, and went home. And I was going to have to accept that I was going to live in my mom's extra bedroom for the rest of my life, and that I was going to work fast food or a factory job. But I wanted more. And so many people told me that that wasn't possible because I was someone who had addiction issues. I was someone who had been incarcerated, and I was going to have to wear that label. Because people extended that care and compassion to me, I don't have to live with that label anymore. I've been given a second chance at life.